Hey, welcome back to Better Than Yourself. Today on Better Than Yourself, white kimchi. I made a kimchi about a year ago now that I just finished off. I've been eating it for a while. And a lot of people complain that it's too spicy. Can they do something else instead of 2 cups of hot peppers? Or, hey, I can't find the gochugaru, I don't know what that is. Or, there's a lot of funny Asian ingredients in it. A couple people complain that I'm not Asian and I shouldn't be making kimchi. So I present to you white kimchi, which is basically kimchi, but kimchi, if you look up the definition for kimchi, it's fermented vegetables. Kimchi can be anything. You take your pick, and it's basically the Korean take on fermented vegetables. So what I want to do is just a couple of white vegetables, or kind of like white chili. It's sort of green stuff. So I'm gonna do. Well, let me show you. For my white kimchi, I'm gonna do some napa cabbage, ginger, a little bit of Asian pear, some scallions, daikon radish, a bunch of garlic, and salt. So real simple recipe. If you can't find napa cabbage, that's fine. Use regular white cabbage. If you can't find pears, use an apple. Use a Bartlett pear. It doesn't matter. Kind of closer to the kimchi, I would probably make sure I had some garlic in it. I would definitely make sure I had some ginger in it. You can use scallions, you can use white onions, you can use red onions. If you can't find, this, I actually went to 3 stores to find one of these today. Use some red radishes, and it'll make the whole mix a nice pink color, so you can make pink kimchi. But have some fun with it. You really, when you do ferments like this, don't get real bent out of shape that you can't find exactly what I used. Put whatever you want in it. If you want it to be somewhat kimchi-like, make it mostly vegetables, and it'll be kimchi. Don't sweat it. Let's get this stuff cut up. I like to start my kimchi out with kind of a paste, a little bit of like a flavor slurry. So I'll do that with the food processor. I'll do all of the garlic. This is, I don't know, a dozen cloves of garlic maybe. And then probably not all of this ginger, but a good bit of this ginger. I'm gonna use the back of the knife and just scrape the dried skin off. You can put the skin in. I used to use the skin all the time, and then someone said, well, the skin is really not a great flavor. Why are you cooking with the skin? And I tasted a little bit of the skin, and I started comparing some of my recipes with and without skin, and realized, you know what? I think for as easy as ginger is to peel, I'm peeling ginger from now on. What'd that take, 2 seconds? So ginger in, garlic's in, and these couple of Asian pears. This is just for a little bit of extra sweetness. Of course, as you know, when you're fermenting, you don't really get sweetness out of sweet things, but they give a nice flavor. They give a nice... You can peel these if you want. I'm just putting them in. And then a little bit of salt will help just chop all this stuff up. You want to use sea salt, you want to use Himalayan salt, you want to use kosher salt. Don't use anything with iodine in it, because iodine, kills bacteria, and we're trying to foster bacteria. So pick your favorite kind of fermenting salt. I've got some links to this salt down below, the Celtic sea salt. 2 tablespoons for what I'm making. I think I'm going to end up with about 1 gallon of this, so we'll see how we come along here. But to this, we grind. I've got my Cuisinart spatula here, so I don't tear up all my spatula collection on, it gets caught on the blade. It's really death to spatulas, so I always just use the same one. Alright, we've got our paste ready. Next, veg. Once you've got your ginger garlic paste, go ahead and start chopping up the vegetables. Not going to use the tops, they're a little withered and gross looking, but the rest of it's nice. Get your scallions in there. Next, the radish. How you process this is completely up to you, whatever you like. I think we could actually do something traditional with it. Just do little julienne. They're kind of nice. Think about when you're making something like this, think about what you want the texture of the finished product to be. Think about what you want these little bits to look like. So here we can do our discs. These are probably too big. I mean, you could do discs. Maybe you could do like some little half moons, about half that thickness. I think what I want to do with mine is just continue on this julienne frenzy here. And just make some little, literally make matchsticks out of them. Like I said, whatever works for you, just don't cut your fingers, cut up the veg. And we got our cabbage here. This guy, we can do in the traditional style. The Koreans will split the root and then tear the cabbage apart. And that gives you all this nice kind of ruffled texture. It makes it come out real nice. Look at that. From there, I'm gonna do probably, I don't know, half-inch wide slices of cabbage. The thicker stuff, where you get into these thick ribs of the thick parts, I slice real thin because that's a real tough part of the veg. So I'm gonna go down to just julienne of that stuff. Work yourself around the root there. I'm not gonna use that. Right? So start out big. Get smaller and smaller as you go. Get your ginger, garlic, pear mixture in here. And stir it in. If you're really dealing with too much volume of cabbage and veg, just let it sit for a couple of minutes, and the salt will actually suck a lot of moisture out of the vegetables, and you'll see the water sort of beating up on the cabbage. But at this point, you remember how much we were dealing with a minute ago. It's literally been about 10 minutes, and I can fit it all in one bowl now. So just give it one final mix. And let's taste it. When you're fermenting, a lot of people think, well, that's an awful lot of salt. I don't want to use that much salt. You really don't have to use a lot of salt. You don't. I mean, the salt's there kind of as your safety belt, as your seat belt, just to make sure that you don't have a lot of mold growing, you don't have a lot of bad bacteria getting into the mix. If you've got good clean hands, good stainless steel clean bowls, there's not a lot to worry about. You can do this with literally no salt. Use a little salt. Salt tastes good. And just barely taste the salt. I think I'm gonna add maybe just one more tablespoon of salt to this. And we'll mix that in real well. At this point, get it into some jars. Get it into your crock, into your fermentation crock. I'm using half-gallon wide-mouth jars here. And I'm just literally gonna scoop it up and dump it in. I think a little catch basin here. Always go for speed. Do you have a pickle packer yet? And what you want to do is just kind of crush it in there, and eventually you'll see I've got these bubbles, I've got this juice coming up. That's what you're going for. You're trying to get a little bit of juice so you know that there's no air bubbles caught down in there. All right, that one's full. So I ended up with, well, 2 quarts and 2 pint and a halves. But I didn't want to put these into another big jar because you want to minimize the amount of what's called headspace in your ferments. You don't want a lot of air in here. You don't want a lot of oxygen near your fermenting vegetables. So it's best to really try to get your ferment into suitably sized jars. So I ended up with this kind of little collection of jars. So at this point, you want to make sure you've got your jars pretty full. You don't want to leave a lot of headspace. You don't want to leave a lot of room, a lot of oxygen on top of the cabbage. We're going to seal these up. So we're going to push all the vegetables down and get that cabbage juice coming up, which is why I ended up in these smaller jars. I didn't want one of these big jars half full of my white kimchi. Push all that down in there. Now you need some kind of a weight. You want something to hold the vegetables down in. Nourished Essentials sent these along. These are really nice. They're little weights that you can use. And they're literally kind of like the pickle pebbles we've seen in some of the other videos, but they've got a little grip in them so you can kind of grab a hold and place them right down in where you need them. So these are really nice. Just go ahead and set these right down, give them a little push, and get that juice to come up. I'm just going to add a little bit of water on top of that. Now we have another issue. So we still have this bunch of air in here. Here's another neat product, also from Nourished Essentials, the Easy Fermenter. What this is these fancy lids that have a one-way seal in them. So what they give you is this real nice plastic cap with a silicone seal, a silicone one-way valve, and a little date. Let's see, today's the 2nd. So you can go ahead and just roll this around to the 2 so you know when you sealed them up. You put these on here and crank them down. They have a little lever that you can use to get it open with. And this valve, as these things, remember these things off-gas, these create carbon dioxide. And instead of having to open them every day and burping them, the little valve lets air out. Now remember, there's oxygen and there's air in there when I closed it up. So they also send along this neat little pump that you can use. Stick it on there and literally evacuate all the air out of the jar. Now, I was worried about that air. Not anymore. There's no air in this jar. I've literally made a vacuum in this jar and I can just leave that sitting on the counter. So I've got, luckily, they sent me a whole box of these. I crank that down on there. Got my extractor pump. And just suck the air out. Look at it's all moving. Remember we left some headspace? I can see, are you guys getting this? See the bubbles coming out? All of that is oxygen in it, and that will cause rot. And I'm literally sucking all the oxygen out of my ferment. And I definitely have I can barely pull this up. It's sucking it back down to itself. So there's that one. Set my date code and my 3rd jar. That actually worked out real well. But the nice, hard plastic and the silicone seal. I'm not even concerned about putting this on too tight because again, I've got that lever that I can pop the seal on it and suck the air out. Yeah, that's great. Look at all the air coming out of that. So there's some voids in there, but I don't think there's any more air in there. It's just all vacuum because I'm not getting any more air. That's a great vacuum pump. All right, these are all set. I got my date code set. I've got my white kimchi all done. So I'll just set these in the cabinet and let them go for a week or 2 and then give one a taste. And then if it's not done, put the cap back on, put the extraction pump back on and suck the air out of it again. Let it go for another couple of days. If you taste one and it's like just perfect, it's just like you like it, put it in the fridge. That just arrests the fermentation process and stops it right where it is. Sandor Katz says that fermenting is really, it's on a spectrum. It's really, there's fresh vegetables and there's, totally sour, almost inedible vegetables. You like them somewhere along here. So when it gets to right where you like them, put them in the fridge, arrest that fermentation process, and you'll keep them just like you like. If you like them sour and miserable and just, too sour that anyone else in the house won't eat them, fine. Put them in the pantry, leave them in the pantry. They'll preserve themselves. The lactic acid that's created by the bacteria on the cabbage, by the lactobacters, will create an acid that will preserve these, and they will keep. This is a practical preservation process. So be sure to enjoy all the products from Nourished Essentials, like the Easy Fermenter and the vacuum pump, and let me know how it worked out for you. Hit the links below and check them out on Amazon. Take care, you guys. See you next Thursday night.